All right, so Zane Grey. So some of you know Zane Grey, have been to the museum. Some of you may have even read Zane Grey. Some of you may have even watched Zane Grey movies. Maybe you've watched Zane Grey theater in the 1950s. But right here in our backyard, we do have one of our country's really most popular writers in the first half of the 20th century that lived just right down the road from where we are. And he drew inspiration, just like all of you probably do, with the outdoors, with the people that he encountered throughout his life. And he really incorporated all of that into his writing. When he was born, his mother gave him the name Pearl Zane Grey as his first name. And the reason that she chose Pearl was the Queen of England at that time was in mourning, and she was wearing pearl gray as her mourning color. So his mother thought that would go really well with their last name. But unfortunately for young Zane Grey, once he started to write, a lot of people thought it was a woman who was penning these stories. So he quickly dropped the name Pearl, went by his middle name Zane. So that's how we know him as. And as I said, growing up in Ohio as a young boy, there was a lot of places that he could really kind of escape and get out into nature. One of the activities and loves that he developed really at a very young age was fishing. And there was a gentleman that lived in his town, Muddy Miser, who was kind of a gentleman that his family told him he really shouldn't associate with. But Zane Grey, as a young boy, was very fascinated by him because Muddy would go to the different streams and go fishing. And Zane Grey kind of really latched onto him, and he developed his love of fishing, but also some of those skills that he carried on later through his life. He would kind of sit in the classroom, he was a daydreamer, and his teachers really did not pin high hopes on young Zane Grey. And they really didn't think he'd go on to achieve all that fame and greatness that he eventually did. So it's kind of interesting that he did prove them wrong and go on to become one of our country's top writers, as I said, in the first half of the 20th century. And Zane Grey's father was a dentist, and something that we don't do today, but as a young son, you would have to help your father in whatever business he was in. And Zane Grey's father would take Zane Grey into the dental practice, and he would be pulling teeth, he would be practicing dentistry, and it kind of led him to develop really very strong arm strength by pulling teeth. And that really helped him out in the long run, because another love that he had was baseball. And he would use that strength that he had as a pitcher. So it was kind of only natural that Zane Grey would go to the University of Pennsylvania, play on the varsity baseball team, but at the same time, he pursued a dental degree. And when he graduated in 1896, he went on to play amateur baseball for a while for the Orange Athletic Club in Orange, New Jersey. Zane Grey's living there, he's practicing dentistry, he does really like it, and it's very hot and humid. So the Erie Railroad, built in the 1840s, coming right out of Jersey City, promotes this area as a place that people can get out of New York City. So people would come up in the summer months, spend time in boarding houses that could be found all over Shohola, up in Lackawaxen, up and down the river valley. So Zane Grey and his brother came up on the Erie Railroad, and for him, the draw was the river. That he would spend his time. And Romer and Zane Grey would come camp on the banks of the Lackawaxen. He'd go out on the river and fish, and really just enjoyed himself. and had that ability to forget about that degree, that job he had in New York City, and really enjoy himself. And on one occasion when he was up here, he met a young girl, Lena Elise Roth, 11 years his younger, and she too was up here, spending time to get away from New York City with his or her family. And it was pretty much love at first sight for them, especially on Lena's side, or Dolly as she was called by Zane Grey. And the two of them would correspond back and forth with each other. And she really had a big impact on Zane Grey and his writing. So Zane Grey, living up here, fishing, hating dentistry, what he decided to do was to try his hand at writing. And what he did in 1902, he wrote an article entitled "A Day on the Delaware." And it was published in Recreation magazine. And kind of what that article did for him is it got the wheels turning in his head. And he thought, writing, this would be really good. This could be something that I would like to do. And he then said, I'm going to try my hand at writing a book. And he took those relatives, those stories that he had out in the Ohio Valley, and decided to write about his aunt, his great aunt, Betty Zane. And this took place during the Revolutionary War. And the fort that they were in, Fort Henry, was under attack. And Betty runs out, brings back a needed supply of ammunition, and helps save the fort. So Zane Grey thought, wow, this would be a great story. We've got a woman, we've got this war, we've got a battle, we've got somebody saving the fort. And he sat down and he penned his novel entitled Betty Zane. Finished his novel, and he decides to take it to different publishing companies in New York City. But one by one, they all turn him down. Nobody wants to take a chance on this unknown writer. And he got very depressed and very discouraged about the whole process. But he had faith. He had faith in this novel, and he had Dolly on his side. And she had faith in him as well. And what Zane Grey did was he got money to have the book published privately. And I just want to quickly show you this, because I have to throw in art, right? I got to throw in art into this program. So he had the book published privately, does it on his own. And this is the only book that Zane Grey ever illustrated. And he did the cover illustration. And I don't know if you want to see all of them, but he did the title artwork for it. And then this picture right here. So this is the title, and then this is the picture that he drew for the title of Betty Zane. And then the last thing that he did for that book, this is just another inset that you might see in Betty Zane. But he also did these kind of, for the first word of the chapter, he did these different illustrations or drawings for them. I don't have all of them. These are all from our collection that we have. So it kind of really shows you he's creative not only in his writing, but also in his drawing as well. He wrote the book, he illustrated the book, not a success for Zane Grey. But A Day on the Delaware, Betty Zane, really were a pivotal point in Zane Grey's life, where he decides dentistry, we're going to put it over here. Writing is what we're going to focus on. And when he and Dolly married in 1905, he leaves New York City behind, leaves dentistry behind, and they move up to Lackawaxen in the old Holllywood farm, which is right on the point where the Lackawaxen comes into the Delaware, and that's where he and Dolly settled, and he begins to write full time. His books are not a success, as I said, so basically what they're living on is an inheritance that Dolly got from her grandfather when he passed away. And then in 1907, he had the opportunity to go on a 6-week expedition to the Grand Canyon, where he was going to be roping mountain lions to be placed in zoos in the East with a gentleman named Buffalo Jones. And Buffalo Jones said, "Sure, you can come with me. No problem, you can come." But Zane Grey had to pay his own way. So Dolly says, "Look, I think this is going to be good for you." She gives him the last of her inheritance. He goes out west, spends 6 weeks in the Grand Canyon, and he's doing all those things that he could only have dreamt about at that point. He's sleeping under the stars, he's roping mountain lions, he's riding horses, and when he comes back to the East, he writes the book, The Last of the Plainsmen. You think that would do it for him, right? No. But in 1910, he writes the book, The Heritage of the Desert, and that is Zane Grey's first commercial success. And everything that Zane Grey writes from that point forward is on the top of the bestseller list. Followed by Riders of the Purple Sage in 1912, and his success cannot be stopped at that point. And I'm sure you guys have read Zane Grey's, right? So he has a tried and true formula, doesn't it? There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, and there's a woman, right? And so the woman has to be saved by the good guy, away from the bad guy. But when you read Zane Grey's books, you realize that his women are strong characters in their own right. They could easily take care of themselves without having somebody take care of them for him or for them. But that's his formula, and that seems to work for Zane Grey. Zane Grey lived in Lackawaxen until 1918. And while he's living and writing here in Lackawaxen, out in California, something's taking off, which is going to change Zane Grey's writing career, and that's the film industry. So out in California, the film industry takes off, and what do they do today? Right up on the bestseller list, and the next thing you know, it's being turned into a movie, right? And that's exactly what happened with Zane Grey in his books. They're on the top of the bestseller list, now they're being turned into movies. And Zane Grey, living here in Lackawaxen, feels that if they're going to be making a movie out of his books, he wants to have some control over that. He wants to have control over the content of the movie. He wants to have control over where they're going to film these movies. And he can't do this in this tiny little hamlet of Lackawaxen. He packs up his family. They take off for California, and he can be closer to the film industry. And in fact, he started his own film company when he moved out to California, but he found that writing, producing movies, just was taking too much of his time. So he sold his film company to a gentleman named Lasky, and Lasky started to buy up with these small film companies. And you might have heard of this little film company called Paramount, which is still today. So kind of that legacy is still in the film industry today. Zane Grey had every intention of coming back here to Lackawaxen. That never happened for him. And now that Zane Grey is making money, it's coming in, he elevates that love of fishing from the Delaware River and takes it global. He is now going to places like Tahiti and the Florida Keys, the Virgin Islands, Australia, New Zealand, and he has fishing camps in all these places. And during his lifetime, he had 10 world records with the fish that he caught. And in fact, He was the first person to catch a fish that weighed over 1,000 pounds solely on a rod and reel. So his skills were phenomenal. So throughout the country, if you didn't know him as a writer and his movies, you knew him as this world-class fisherman. And so he kind of led a life that most of us would love to have. He'd write some books, make some money, and then sail off to Australia, and then come back and write another book. Extremely popular. Everybody knew the name Zane Grey. From the 19-teens all the way up into the 1970s. His books were continued to be published and made into films. But for Zane Grey, his life ended very short. He passed away in 1937 at the age of, 39 at the age of 67. And when he passed away, he left behind about 20 unpublished manuscripts. But Dolly continued to publish well into the 1950s. The last one to be published was done in 1996, and that was George Washington Frontiersman. And today, I don't know, he's not as popular as he once was, but I think he's very well worth reading again for sure. Did I do okay time-wise?
You're doing perfect.
All right. So that's kind of Zane Grey's life in a nutshell for you.